Hey, Lance Hahn.
Hey, Brett.
How you doing?
See you, man.
Good to see you.
Yeah. How are things?
Getting together again. Our second time now.
Episode 2.
Episode 2. I think the second episode is the hardest one. Or at least
from your vast experience.
From my vast experience as a world famous podcaster.
That's right.
Well, lots of things we could talk about today. There's definitely tons of stuff going on in the economy. The economy is inextricably linked at this moment in time to workforce dynamics, work supply. I think the latest report came out yesterday, and it was there was an 11.5 million person jobs gap between open positions and available workforce, which is one of the largest in history. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that the entire economy right now is really revolving around workforce issues and participation or non-participation or the Great Resignation or, on and on and on. And in the middle of all of this, we're still in a pandemic. I heard the first person publicly yesterday refer to the post-pandemic economy. So there are people who are basically saying we're
as in the present tense.
Yeah. Like we are currently in the post-pandemic economy, according to this person.
Interesting.
And I think, if I just look at people's actions, I think a lot of people are behaving that way as if we're in a post-pandemic society. And that's fine. I mean, it's, a choice that people make, and people are going to call it at different times. I myself have been given to, feelings and thoughts that, it's certainly different than it was, a year and a half ago, or even a year ago, even 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But in the middle of all of this, we have, a long tail pandemic. We have people evaluating important decisions based on that about whether to return to work or not. And all of this seems to be wrapped up in the same big picture, which is, and I'll shut up. But my experience has been that every company that I've talked to who's experiencing execution issues, the root cause of those issues are losing key people, whether they're leaders or whether they're people on the team. 50% turnover in 2021 across all industries. So you're just seeing a massive migration of people from one company to another. And I think a big part of it is what kind of work experience are you creating? And a big part of that is, are you forcing people to come back to the office or not? So today we're going to talk about return to the office. So tell us about return to the office. Return to work.
Return. Well, I don't like return to work.
Okay.
You have to remember, I've been working remotely for 12 years now.
Yeah. That's a great point.
13 years. So I think I've been working most of that time.
Yeah. You're welcome for the softball there.
But I want to start off a little bit with a story, and it's from somebody that I know that works here locally in Portland, and they've recently returned to the office, hybrid arrangement, and they had an issue with their back where they couldn't sit in their office chair for all day. Of course, this is a company that worked remotely all the way through the last 2 years. So she assumed she could probably just work remotely while she was healing up from her back issues. And of course, said, nope, that would not be fair. Got to get you back in the office as soon as possible. So if you can't come in the office, need you to take some paid time off. This is what a lot of organizations are doing right now. It's really interesting just to see this. It's almost been a light switch for some organizations to get back into that muscle memory of, if you're not in the office, you're not working. sort of thing, and talking about fairness, talking about like, well, if we let you do it, then we have to let everybody do it, which is not true, by the way. But there's all kinds of things along those lines that some of the things I feel like we thought we collectively learned did not hit, even here in like a city with a city that is still very low in occupancy, office occupancy. And so part of this was driven by something I shared in the newsletter this week, which is, office occupancy rates across metro areas. And would it shock you that 3 of the top 5 are from Texas?
No, not at all. I actually attended a conference yesterday, and the mayor of Fort Worth spoke there and kind of talked about, the economic vision for the city. And, she pointed out that every metropolitan area in Texas or every city that was a big, part of the metropolitan area was the beneficiary of a relocated Fortune 500 company in Texas, except for Fort Worth. And then she went on to detail, all of the issues with occupancy rates and commercial properties in the downtown area, and how that's running long ways against, the economic development vision for the city. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
So this article again, which is linked to the newsletter, but from Fortune, I got it pulled up here. So top 5 cities by highest office occupancy rates. Austin, number 1 of major metropolitan areas with 58.8%.
I'm sorry. So first of all, you were saying that the highest occupancy rates are in Texas.
Highest, yes.
And 55% is Austin. And
58%,
that's
yes.
58%, and that's high.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I misunderstood.
Houston's at 50. Dallas is 49. And then it takes a sharp drop off after that. So Los Angeles, 39, Chicago, 37. And then, you go to the bottom of the list and it's San Jose at 31%, New York City, 32, San Francisco, which I was just in, 33%. I believe that like half the lunchtime spots are gone or have severely reduced hours. Philly, 35. So number 5 surprised me because Washington, D.C. is 5th on the lowest occupancy rate, which, I mean, they're the federal government. They've got lots of traditional employers there. Yep. I'm surprised that they don't have more people come in the office, but 36%.
Well, am I wrong that even at the highest end of, the spectrum of occupancy rates, those are still pretty low numbers?
Yeah, it's really low numbers. I'm sure Austin is probably beneficiary 1. Obviously, it's the state capital, so you've got lots of state workers based there, lots of probably in person, in office bias there. But I think to your point, lots of big tech companies have moved there, moved their headquarters there. So I'm sure it's just a matter of like there's probably a supply issue, in particular in Austin.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. So what do you think it all means? Because at the same time, I think we're receiving a clear message that especially larger companies, most of them, correct me if I'm wrong, are asking people to come back to the office. Yeah.
Well, and you look at certain sectors. And so you look at, Jamie Dimon of Chase, and they want people back in the office. And he had kind of put a really hard line in the sand, like this was going to happen. And then you get a bunch of people there just rejecting that idea. Apple's the same way. They really want people back in the office. You see a lot of hardliners sort of putting the line in the sand and trying to maybe back up a little from it, or just dealing with the consequences. But to your point earlier, the amount of open jobs that are out there, the big gap between, available candidates and talent and being able to fill those jobs, it seems like a unnecessarily risky move right now. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I want to break it down kind of, decision by decision and factor by factor. So let's start with your friend. What was your friend's response to, this crazy situation where it wasn't just like, I want to work from home. I want to keep working from home. It's like, no, I have a medical condition that, makes it appropriate for me to work from home right now in a hybrid environment where they're set up to do it. Right. So what was this person's response?
Yeah. I mean, they were very, she was very focused on like, okay, she was like kind of worried about going back to the office. She had done she was one of the folks that I think when I talk about, before the pandemic, when I talked about working from home, she had a high degree of skepticism about it. Mm-hmm. And that's fair. I mean, I think lots of people did, right?
Lots of people did.
Yeah. And, after she experienced it, she's like, oh, I never want to go back. And then, whenever, they decided to come back, just like, well, at least it's hybrid. And they're saying we're going to stick with hybrid for a long time. Cause we're also like trying to get more people, into a smaller office space. Cause they were one of the folks that sort of abandoned office spaces. And, maybe I'll stick out, and now it's like, maybe it's time to look for another job.
So she's going to vote with her feet.
She's going to vote with her feet. Now, obviously, she put up a stink with her employer, but they kind of just like shrugged their shoulders. And this person that's been with their organization for like 5 or 6 years, that's not a good situation. And so, you've seen sort of like some bad behavior from folks, and I think it's going to come back to bite them. And like what will seem like very individual ways will just start to become sort of a mountain of data that they've maybe made a mistake or a miscalculation there.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the employee perspective, right? The employee perspective, all the research that I've seen, all the research that we've conducted ourselves, including surveys of our own people at the Star Conspiracy, indicate that even people who had pretty negative views of working from home as a style of work prior to the pandemic, quickly not only accepted working from home, but also came to prefer it over, kind of a traditional show up to the office, kind of situation. And so I think it's acceptance and preference for working from home is much larger than, acceptance and preference for going back to the office. And just to put that in perspective, this podcast studio that I record in is 5 minutes from my home, 5 minutes from my home. And I was sitting in my pajamas at home. I've been cranking on work since like 6 o'clock this morning. And I saw it as such a huge inconvenience to actually get out of my pajamas and put on regular clothes and drive the 5 minutes to the studio because of the interruption and work that it was going to cause, that I almost recorded it from home, but then realized that'd be a really, shitty thing to do. So, I showed up. But I've become so comfortable working from home and prefer it so much just because of the, limited interruptions, the amount of time I'm able to focus on work, the amount of other time that frees up so that I can, do things that I wasn't able to do before the pandemic, like help out with homework a lot more than I used to, et cetera. That it just seems like, I'm the CEO and founder of the company and I don't want to go back to, showing up to the office. So, but, so there's this overwhelming employee sentiment to stay working at home. Companies are calling people back. We're in the middle of a great resignation with high turnover. Clearly, this is a factor. What's the shareholder experience here? What's the perspective? What's the driving motivation behind, sticking to this, in some ways antiquated notion of having people show up to the office?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think if you look at some of the, fundamental ways that organizations have traditionally been run. And I think there's inherent discomfort with that. And so I think, when you look at your experience of working from home and, mine, which is, I don't have quite the commute out to my office. I am separate from my house though, purposefully, because, we have kids and pets and sometimes spouses sharing the same space. I wanted to be out of that space. But part of it's about control. I think that's a big piece. And so like control for the employee, like I love having my space set up exactly how I want. All this ridiculous shit on my walls. It's painted the right way. I've got the desk I want. I've got the chair I want. I got the monitor I want. I got like everything I want. I've got it set up the exact way I want to do. I don't have any excuses for not being productive here. Got everything set up the way I want. Organizations have built their management models around kind of a top-down command and control, management system. So they want to do that. I'm not going to say that's the only reason. A lot of these companies have made long-term investments in real estate and driving their workforce. They have a deep commitment for things like collaboration, of in-person meeting culture. They believe that, and some people believe, and I know this has showed up on some of our surveys, even that they want to be in person at a certain degree. But what we see time and time again is that managers and executives want their people working in person, but they themselves don't necessarily want to work in person. So there's some recent research that I know. I'm just going to keep plugging the newsletter, but in our Work Leader Weekly that I posted last week about sort of the executive, non-executive split between not attitudes about remote work, but behaviors. And so they found that non-executives were coming into an office 5 times more than executives. And so you still had executives working from home, still taking meetings, still sort of running things like as they've been the last 2 years, but asking like everybody come in, work at the office, those sorts of things. And so I think it's a multitude of factors, but I think why there's such great tension and conflict there's an element of control that employees have pulled back and they don't want to give up, and that employers have given up a little bit, but they would like to pull that back as much as possible. So that's why you sort of see organizations doing steps towards being in person, whether it's hybrid, whether it's prepping people and sort of, putting a little bit of hints out there that, things are going to return to normal. At some point, so like don't get too comfy, don't move away from the home office, don't do any major life decisions that are going to interrupt what, might, return back to a commute, being in person all the time, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think you're really on to something with the control issue, because I find that, the notion of control goes hand in hand with trust. And so the less trust that you have, the more likely you are to try to control, people and outcomes and, et cetera. And I think that there's still, a significant residual perception from the shareholder perspective that individuals inherently cannot be trusted, that they don't care as much about, more senior people in the organization or shareholders themselves. And that, the only way to feel confident that people are being absolutely as productive as they can be is to keep an eye on them and be looking over their shoulder all the time. And even if you have that orientation, just as an aside, there's a huge field of work tech solutions out there that can allow you to be as big an asshole virtually as you were in person. The reality is, everything that we've seen indicates that people thrive with more autonomy, and that their own ability to structure their days around confluent, kind of demands from multiple social roles actually creates a better experience in all of those social roles, and creates less stress. And I haven't seen anything except for data that refutes the notion that productivity decreased while most of us were working from home. Everything that I've seen and witnessed is, company success, better employee experiences, better customer experiences. So I don't really know, except for, this fear-based desire to hew to convention and traditional structures, why people feel that, getting together in the office is so super important in terms of like productivity and, great results. I honestly, I just don't get it. And part of it is like, well, in these large companies, people are looking at their utilization rates, not their utilization rates, their space utilization rates, their occupancy rates, how many people are coming to the office and all that stuff. And you can look at that two ways. You can look at it as an opportunity and say, well, no one's coming into the office, so, maybe we need less office,
That's right.
Or you can say, we're paying all this money for this office and nobody's coming into it, damn it, which I had this experience, over the weekend when I went in to clear out the stuff from my office. And, I looked around and I was like, damn it, we paid a lot of money for this office. I love that office so much. We paid a lot of money for the remodel. It's in an amazing area of, Fort Worth. And, about 5 or 6 people show up to it. And I had this really emotional reaction of, kind of a mixture of like sadness, but also like just a little bit of regret across multiple, perspectives. Like in just a moment, I regretted having bought the office and not foreseeing that we wouldn't need an office in the year 2022. I regretted
not seen that.
I know, right? I regretted people not coming into the office. I regretted my reaction to it, and it's like, so I think people get like wrapped up in their own perspectives of what they're in control of. And so if you're in control of, people showing up to the office or, occupancy rates or utilization rates for, that space and, it's not hitting the numbers that you expect it to hit, that might cause you to, act out from your perspective about, trying to hit your goals and get more people back in the office. So I'm sure that there are a lot of factors, many of them emotional. And the thing that I can't wrap my mind around is I get the emotional factors. I don't get any quantitative factors. No one has made a compelling argument to me or made a compelling argument in messages to their employees about why they should come back to the office. No one has made a compelling argument about why that is better for, employee performance, company performance, customer satisfaction. I hear a lot of emotional arguments and I hear a lot of, like opinions. Man, like that's your opinion, man. But I don't hear any like facts, like since working from home, we have declined in, revenue, profit, productivity, like anything that would create, and I may not agree with it, but I get it context for people coming back to the office.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair point because it is, I mean, everything that we've told that, especially on the shareholder side, companies care about, has not, I mean, like there's been industry factors, but that has been driven purely by the pandemic. But like from like a mode of operations, like where people are based, definitely not. Now there's obviously been some research done on, people's view of collaboration. And actually, I mentioned this because, before we went kind of, digital first, we had a lot of meetings where I'd be the only remote employee, dialing into a conference room. And that's not a great experience. And so I think I think people are kind of going back to this, whether it's hybrid, whether it's, some people, executives still working from home while everybody's at the office and they're still like, yeah, dial me in for the meeting though. And, so like, it's still not a great experience with, working remotely that way. So like people, pretty consistently the polling on like collaboration and communication, has been down significantly. But that's from employees. So, I mean, like we're still talking about the employee experience. We're still talking about like softer, culture is another one, the feeling of connection, Blue Board did, some great research. And I'm not just saying that because we helped them out with it on Employee Connection at work, and people definitely feel disconnected from one another. But again, not a hard number that usually like executives and especially the financial suite actually care about. This is all about like improving the employee experience. So those are the only numbers that I've seen that have actually been like, okay, we've got a problem to fix here, but it's not, we can overcome it. But it is, I mean, that's definitely still an issue, right?
Yeah, it's a failure of imagination. It's like, first of all, I would ask the question for anyone, because that's what, in our surveys to our own people, those were the only negative areas that popped up about the remote work experience going back to 2020 and in 2021. We haven't done it in 2022 yet, but, it was high marks for everything except there was, occasional feelings of isolation, being disconnected, feeling disconnected, and loneliness. But when you get to that point, you basically have two doors to walk through. You can walk through the door of, well, let's get back what we lost by going back to the way things were.
That's right.
Or there's this other door over here around, let's figure out new ways, to deliver, what we lost so that we can hold on to all of these other tremendous gains, which have been, substantial and significant. And, it just kind of goes, on and on and on from there because, like hybrid, I think you nailed it with hybrid work environments. I don't really like the hybrid work model. And it's mostly because of inclusion. And if you're on the far end, the minute that you get 2 or 3 people who are in a room together and everyone else is on the outside, that's a huge source of the collaboration issue, because collaboration feels low for the people who are on the outside and high for the people on the inside. That doesn't mean that the people on the inside are right or they're doing it the right way. It just means that it sucks a whole lot less than other people who are like zooming in, and there might be some, other way of doing it that's even better for everyone. So that kills me. And then there's just like this basic no shit thing. It's like, look at the impact on society and the world. For years and years and years, people have been moving to urban areas. That's where all of the big jobs have been. If you really wanted to, kind of get to the top of your career, you wanted to be in New York or San Francisco or LA or something like that. Doesn't matter what the industry is. So many people moved to these areas that housing became difficult. The cost of living went up. And so you might be making an outrageous salary, but you were spending 99% of it on just, the rent and being able to eat. And all of those problems go away if you let people, kind of live where they want to live and still work the jobs that they want to work. And it not only like changes the whole, future possibilities, the trajectory of future possibilities for that individual, but it's also reshaping, urban areas that have had significant issues because of the migration of workers into, 40-story office buildings and, sprawling, downtown. I mean, like I said, I was just at a meeting where the mayor of Fort Worth, despite these low occupancy rates and all that stuff, was talking about extending the urban core and reducing housing in the urban core to make room for more office buildings. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like that doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all.
We need housing.
If anything, we're set up for the opposite. We're set up to be a great place for people to work from. Because it's just easier to live in Fort Worth than it is a lot of places in the United States that are more expensive, more congested, more everything. And so it sure seems like that's chasing a brass ring that is going to tarnish in your hand after you grab it. But
it doesn't make a lot of sense to me from that perspective. And it also seems like it has been a net gain for a lot of communities. I mean, we hear a lot of stories about folks moving back home. I certainly had that experience moving back to the Portland area, when my daughter was hitting school age, and it's like the whole ecosystem around like having family and friends and like roots in the place is amazing. You had a whole bunch of people, to your point, that were, pursuing careers, moving to whatever the hot city is for your industry, and like just like living like that. And then you've opened up the doors to live wherever. I think some of this too, from the employee perspective, is like some peer movement too. Is like you see your peers being able to make those moves, but you're working for a company that's still insisting on hybrid work, trying to get you back in the office 5 days a week. It's like everybody I know doesn't have to do that. So why am I doing that? So yeah. I think there's some peer level, I don't know if I call it pressure, but just kind of look around like, wait, I'm in the same industry as all these people, and nobody's having to make the same adjustments that I'm making. Yeah. What did I do wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. And, it seems like the typical response is that companies know it's shitty. And so they're just increasing salaries. It's like, well, if we pay people enough, they'll do anything. And it's, right. Again, to me, a very dehumanizing perspective. Yeah. When someone, and I can't talk about this person out loud, but, let's just say that it's someone who runs a very large professional association in the HR space that's responsible for all the lobbying for, HR and that sort of organization. When somebody who, say, is the president of that organization stands up in front of a group of, business executives and owners and laments the fact that millennials suck so much, and that makes fun of, like discretionary benefits like pet insurance, as if pet insurance was like the hill you want to die on, or like it's emblematic of, this new, generation of trustless workers. It shows you how deep the rot is around this dehumanized perspective of individuals, of people, viewing them as human capital instead of as of humans, and kind of sitting back in your smoking jacket, chewing on your cigar, and saying, "Well, just pay them enough, and they'll do whatever you want them to do." It's like that's not the answer to the Great Resignation if you haven't figured it out yet.
Oh, it's so terrible. And it does keep, pay does solve some short-term things, but it doesn't change the fundamentals. And the ways that it does change the fundamentals, it just, obviously increases the cost of doing business significantly. And millennials are turning 40. I turned 40 last year, and, born in 81, so I think the whole perception of millennials is kind of crazy. A lot of people have settled down or really highly desire to settle down, but haven't because a lot of financial fundamentals in place there. But you're right. There's a whole compensation strategy. And actually, somebody I know worked at an organization that their whole compensation strategy was like just to top you out as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. That way, if you were to ever leave, they know you're going to be taking probably a 20 to 30% pay cut to do that. Yeah. So they know at the very least you're going for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, depending on kind of what your motivation factor is there. But yeah, it was also a lock in on, we're not going to lose on pay, even if our work environment isn't great and that sort of thing. You're going to look at every job offer and you're going to look at your paycheck every week and you're going to say, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And at some point it becomes worth it.
Well, I don't know. And see, that's my whole point. It's like, if that's the kind of workforce you want, if that's the kind of workforce who, basically, the only reason they're staying is because they know they can't do better somewhere else, from a compensation perspective. And if they have to ask themselves every time they get a paycheck, is it worth it? If that's the kind of workforce you want, then treat them like shit and pay them well. And I am not, diminishing the role of compensation. I think that compensation should be fair, including increasing as costs increase. Like in the moment that we're in now, wages are increasing rapidly. in response to, kind of the increased cost of living. We did the largest cost of living adjustment in agency history this year, and it'll probably be another one next year because we're sitting at like 8% inflation year over year right now, which is astounding. So, compensation is an important part, but I want my people to not have to look at their paycheck to figure out if it's worth working there. You know what I mean? And so I just, while I know that compensation is important, I believe that too often people turn to it as a way to overcome other deficiencies that should be met. And like, here's the big picture for me. Like, where's the money supposed to come from to pay people well and to give them a great employee experience? Because for, a lot of folks, they make it seem like you have to choose. It's like, we can either pay people well, or, we've got this strategy over here where we're not going to pay people well, but we're going to create a great employee experience, as if, all of the money has to come out of the employee basket. And the reality is, the reality is happiness is at a 50-year low. Customer satisfaction across all industries is at a 25-year low. The planet is on fire. Literally. There's fires everywhere. There's tornadoes the size of fucking like states passing through, Texas and Oklahoma and, this entire area all the time. Meanwhile, profits are at a 100-year high. So when you ask, where is the money supposed to come from to both compensate people fairly and create a great employee experience, and position it as if there's like one basket of money, because that's the way we make the numbers work, over here, is fucking ridiculous. Because the reality is, I'm not a socialist. I'm not a communist. I am an unapologetic capitalist. But I know in my heart that creating sustainable businesses is going to require a reimagining of the profit equation for companies, and that we can't expect that profits are going to increase over time without, ever stopping. Based largely on projections about productivity rates. It's like, and that's the other big lie. The other big lie out of a world of big lies is that the reason that profits are increasing is because of productivity increases. And that's just bullshit. The reason that profits are increasing is because companies are finding more and more ways to squeeze costs out of everything they do all the time. While increasing, the return on investment to, investors and shareholders. And I get it. I mean, if you ask most like MBAs, what is the purpose of a business? Their reflexive response is to return value to shareholders.
Yep. That's it.
I'm sorry. If that's like your view of why a business exists, then you get what you deserve. I'm sorry. You were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I do love the tension between sort of the pay and compensation and employee experience. And I think, a lot of the coverage and a lot of the research actually out there about how people think about employee experience, how people think about culture, those sorts of things. You see these research piece. I know you've seen 100 of these, but the networks will say people would take a 20% pay decrease to work from home, or employee experience. A place with a good employee experience could pay 10% less because they're providing this great thing. And there's this thing that I covered in the newsletter this week about contact centers, customer service centers where people just spend all day just yelling at somebody making, $15-20 an hour about their flight or their cell phone bill or the cable being out or something like that. And it's not a great job. It's actually gotten much, much worse too. Through the pandemic, people have just sort of lost all semblance of just being polite and kind, it seems like. But, one of the things was these contact centers were just losing people hand over fist. I think T-Mobile was the company that was mentioned that their turnover rate went from 20% a year in their contact centers to 65 or 70%, something like that. And so their response, the I think it was the Wall Street Journal. Like this was their coverage as they talked about all these like employee experience things they did. So they more breaks, more mental health, more contact with managers, bringing people into the office was part of the employee experience thing, which I thought was hilarious because people felt disconnected. Further down, they mentioned the fact that they increased pay by 33% too. And guess what? Their retention problems subsided a little bit. So I think you could do all the right things on the employee experience side if you're not balancing that with, to your point, like, fair compensation and, kind of realizing sort of the, what inflation has done to, costs across the board, affordability, those sorts of things. I think you're missing the boat. And if you're kind of torqued fully on the compensation side, you're right. I mean, you're just going to keep paying, and you're going to keep trying to find ways to either cut the employee experience or cut the cost that oftentimes impacts downstream impacts of the employee experience. Like when you add automation, or you add, you take other parts out of the customer experience that makes them, more difficult to work with. So there's all kinds of different things that I feel like we should know better on this stuff, but it feels like a lot of organizations are sort of missing it.
Well, I mean, honestly, there's no clear, understanding or framework for even understanding, what employee experience is. There's not a clear definition. There's not a good strategic framework. There's a lot of anecdotal correlation between, like, everyone wants to solve the turnover problem. Everyone wants, all of the candidates that they interview to accept the position if it's offered to them. But if you ask them what they need to do in order to achieve that reality, there's a lot of anecdotal correlations between things that people have done, but there's not any real solid information out there that detangles compensation from employee experience, or the employee success component of employee experience, and kind of can look at the impact of both of those simultaneously. And I think there's also, just a huge research problem, because a lot of times, like the types of research that you were talking about, where people are asked to hypothesize about a fictional, kind of reality, where if you could get this, how much of a pay cut would you take? There's so much frame bias in that research style, where, the difference between how people will react to a hypothetical situation versus how they'll react to a real situation in life is incredibly different. When you cut someone's pay, like a lot of people, like we put in a 3-day weekend. Probably the single most attractive element of our employee experience. I can tell from looking at all the different surveys that we've done over time that the one thing that I could do to make sure that everyone left the agency as quickly as possible is to take away the 3-day weekend, because there's just no debate about it. It's like everybody, cherishes it. It works better. It's a better way to work, et cetera. So that's, it's really clear that, that is one, component of our approach to work that has a significant impact on the overall employee experience. But a lot of people who pursued similar strategies over the years, and not just during the pandemic, would go to what they call a 4-day work week. And we intentionally call a 3-day weekend because we want everyone to, use their lizard brain, limbic, system to process and think about Fridays, to have like a visceral reaction to Fridays the way they would a Saturday or a Sunday. It's like there are certain things that fit into the weekend. There's certain things that are not. So we're very intentional about it. But a lot of people who went to 4-day work weeks, they cut pay at the same time. And they assumed that, the attractive, value of a 4-day work week would be enough to offset, the decrease in compensation. And then you're dealing in human territory. And in human territory, even in a hypothetical situation, if someone would take a pay cut to, work a 4-day work week, that's really different than taking away, something that someone already had and has a sense of status tied to it. and has a sense of their personal identity tied to it. And so now something has been taken from them. Rightfully, they protest that, and it doesn't feel right. So, these things are just correlated in terrible ways when people are talking about them out in the world, because they're not really separating the sequence of events, the order of, how significant these things are in terms of the way the plans were rolled out. Is the 4-day work week the only thing they did, or was it a basket of
one
measures?
Of things? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Where they
hard to isolate it.
Yeah, it's hard to isolate it, but it doesn't keep people from, waxing philosophical about it. And most of the people who wax philosophical about all of these employee experience things, if they have a predominantly shareholder experience, it's all leading them to the same conclusion, which is get back into the office, damn it. And we're going to hire our way through, this high turnover period instead of, focusing on repairing, the terrible parts of our employee experience and really emphasizing the great parts about it. It's your imagination.
Yeah, I think on the EX side, there's definitely some things you can't unring once you ring the bell. And I think you sent out a survey about the 3-day weekend, and I think it was my only piece of feedback is like, once you go this way, you can't unring it. And compensation is actually very much the same way, like study after study. Once sort of somebody gets the baseline, they've sort of adjusted their whole lifestyle around a compensation, certain level of compensation. Even if you're giving them something for that compensation, it's really hard for people to make that change, even if they desire it, even if they would be willing to pay for it. There's something about that psychologically, and you're getting back to the human element of that as well. There's a handful of things that are like that. And not to go back to the pet insurance thing, but pet insurance probably isn't one of those things. But there's levels of like how people work together, things like starting times, things like, days off, things like, comp. Those things change your life in really visceral ways. And it's tough to come back from that if that's how you've operated for such a long time, and then you sort of yank it back. I think, not to just go full circle, but I mean, I think that's a lot of the return to the office rejection too. Is like you've gotten used to a certain lifestyle at a certain level. You haven't had to give up pay, generally speaking. You've gotten a level of autonomy and control of your life. It's really hard to unring that bell. I think organizations are going to struggle with this for a long time. They're going to get a workforce that. Certain percentage of the workforce does want to come to the office. We know that, even with our organization that's, I think, highly attuned to remote work, some people want to be there. And, but that's a very limiting piece of the overall employment puzzle, especially for, white collar knowledge workers, tech workers, those sorts of things.
Well, let's bring it home to the work leaders and the HR folks. I did want to hit on something that you said, which is everyone got used to it, right? And the thing is, like, it's not that people got used to something they hate. They got used to it because it was an improvement in lifestyle in most cases. And obviously, and the great thing about it is, companies didn't really have to work that hard to, make this incredibly positive adjustment for humans in terms of lifestyle and quality of life possible. They just had to let it happen. They didn't have to one of the gifts, and I hate to talk about it this way, and I hope everyone understands the context that I'm coming from, but I think there were a lot of opportunities and gifts that were delivered during the pandemic. And this is one of them because we didn't have a choice. All we had to do was let it happen. And if we let it happen, it, across the board had such a positive impact on people's lives. And, all you have to do is keep letting it happen, and fixing the rough, edges around it.
That's right.
Which there's plenty of people out there, making it happen. So, there's plenty of pages to copy from, but we've talked about the employee perspective. We've talked about the shareholder perspective and the creative tension between the two. Poor HR people, man, they're always stuck in the middle. Do they serve the employees or do they serve the shareholders? And where do they fit in this return to work story?
That's right. Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's been a real easy couple of years to be empathetic of work leaders, and especially folks that have sort of lined that. But at the same time, they've also got tremendous opportunity. I mean, I think every major organization has put HR back at the boardroom table. They're there. And so, I think part of this is making use of this unique moment, not just for personal gain, which, I mean, I think, good work leaders are showing that they are worth every cent you pay for them. Whenever you've got a good one there. But, I mean, helping organizations navigate this, and helping employees navigate this. And so I think part of this is also understanding where your workforce is at on a human level, and helping bring that reality to the board, to executive leadership, and being able to bring that with, there's so many different ways you can do this, through surveying, through interviews, through all kinds of things to sort of bring that voice. I think work leaders can never get away from being the in between of employees and that sort of thing. And ultimately, I think we've always seen HR as sort of this weird hybrid role. Cynics will say, like, hey, HR works for corporate. Don't tell them anything you wouldn't tell a cop, or the president of the company. That, because that's who they're ultimately going to report to. But I think good HR leaders have shown that, especially right now when there's been lots of uncertainty, lots of change management, that sort of thing, that good leadership goes a long ways in building trust, in building that accountability across the organization as well, about making the rest of the executive team ask hard questions about doing stupid shit. Let's go back to the office 5 days a week. Well, we're going to lose. We did a survey on this. Mm-hmm. We're going to lose 30% of the workforce within the next year. If we do that, so and it's going to be some of our best folks if we insist on that. So if we're going to make that decision, let's make that decision with our eyes wide open, rather than just saying we're gonna make them do it. So I mean, I think there's I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but there's no level of comfort for HR and work leaders right now. They still gotta sort of live that life on the fence between those two worlds, and try to make them come together. It's a different skill set than I think where it was 2 years ago.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, in your conversations with HR people, are you hearing more HR people saying, yeah, we absolutely need to get back to the office? Or are you hearing HR people saying, the executives want everybody back in the office, and yes, I'm trying to figure out
one.
Across the board, right? Because I think there's very few executives that have a better line into how employees are thinking than HR. And so, I mean, they just see the discussions with managers, they see everything, they see the challenges, obviously, with, I think remote work and hybrid and those sorts of things. I think the great thing about lots of the HR leaders and work leaders that I talk to is they're very pragmatic about it too. But that pragmatism is also being extended to the enormous power shift that has taken place with employees too. And so, I think whether their personal feelings are, it'd be great to be back at work or not, they realize, I think, the reality of it, which is this is going to be very painful for our organization. And at the end of the day, I'm going to be the one that has to try to fix this. So I'm going to have to no one's listening to replace
people.
Yeah. No one's listening to them. It's almost like,
some organizations are, but you see these organizations that are very bullheaded about, getting back to the office. It's clear, they've sort of bullied their way into that decision.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny in a dark kind of way, because when you think about it, most of the companies that I've talked to, like the person who's in charge of HR or the person who's in charge of employee experience or, whatever, ended up being one of the most essential people during the pandemic.
Yes.
ended up being the voice of, the entire workforce, and ended up driving strategy in a lot of cases, because strategy was, keeping people, part of the company, keeping them, productive, getting them what they need, supporting them, providing all of the special help that,
That's right.
was necessary. It was all HR. And so it's almost like, okay, thank you, HR people, for getting us through one of the most treacherous, uncertain times in human history. Now shut the fuck up, get back to work, and get people back in the office.
Figure out how to get people back in the office. If you do that, then you've won the piece de resistance. I mean, like it's insane.
Yeah. It's almost like the most important part that they did for executives was just like the climax of the story, but the story ends with everything getting back to normal.
That's right.
And so it's like exit stage left triumphantly after getting everyone back to the office.
Great job.
But the reality is just, let them keep doing what they were doing before.
That's right.
Which is shit that works.
That's right.
But I don't know. What are we going to do?
It's tough. Yeah.
All right, Lance. Well, I enjoyed our conversation today, and I look forward to talking with you again next week. Great newsletter. Read it top to bottom, every link, every time. And I really appreciate you doing it.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lance. Later.
Later.